Hi, I'm Paul Salmon. I'm a psychic medium. My guest today is Leo Bonomo, fellow psychic medium. Hi, Leo.
Hi, Paul.
Psychic medium or spiritualist medium?
I actually prefer inspirational medium because most of what I do is inspired or channeled.
Okay.
Whether I'm teaching,
Yeah.
workshops, it's all inspired.
Excellent. Now, it's nice to see you because we joined up here about a couple of years ago.
Yep, a couple of years.
And I want to start with this book because you mentioned a book in the previous interview.
Yeah.
Is it all finished? Is it all published and in the shops?
Yeah, you need to order it from Waterstones and places like that. But it's on Amazon. You can also get it from my site, www.leo-bonomo.com. There's an ebook version as well for Kindle, and I can't think of the other versions.
But it's got out there, hasn't it?
It's got out there,
Excellent.
yeah.
And what's the name of the title?
The title's called Summerland, and that refers to a place called Summerland in spirit, which is basically what most people would recognise as heaven. And the reason they call it Summerland is because it's eternal summer, eternal blue sky, and whatever temperature you would like, it's just perfect for you.
What if I like winter?
You can find regions that are winter, I'm sure.
I bet you think, oh, you're awkward again, Paul.
But people, well, that's the thing, you know, when you pass over, for example, if you lived in a place that was mainly desert, you would find yourself somewhere familiar. And as you progressed, you would understand that there were cities and universities, that kind of thing. So you would gravitate to those places, but you would initially find yourself somewhere that you're really comfortable.
Okay. Now, what's your book about, Leo?
It's about a young boy called Alex, just prior to his passing, and then what he finds in spirit, how he progresses. And in a sense, I suppose it's a kind of journal of what he finds. And the whole thing was channeled by automatic writing, so it was spirit inspired. And what would happen is I would be woken at night with a few words, and would gradually understand that actually if I didn't get up and start writing, I'm going to be awake all night. It took me a while to work that out. It's quite similar to that scene in Ghost, actually, where he's singing I'm Henry VIII, I am. And so I would start writing, and I'd remember the first few words, and then I'd completely pass out, and would come back round.
Now, when you say pass out, do you mean collapse or just pass out?
Just unconscious. So the pen would actually be guided by spirit, so they would physically write it through me. And then I'd come round when they'd finished, and sometimes it would just be a couple of lines, and that wouldn't be so intense. But and other times it would be paragraphs. Sometimes I'd have sheets of A4 just completed. And the whole process took roughly 3 years with some large gaps in between. And so the actual writing time would have been about 3 months.
So see, these gaps in between, I'm always intrigued about things like this. Supposing the gap on the earth was like a month or so until you picked up a pen and started writing again.
Yeah.
Is that the same amount of time over there?
They don't have time in spirit. Time is a man-made concept. The only time that spirit use what we would recognise as time, if, for example, a loved one was to pass over, they would be aware that the moment was right to meet them. So everything's known in spirit, and when a communicator comes through, whether they've been told what's going to happen, what we would consider as a future event, is one thing. Whether they're allowed to tell us is something completely different. But they would be aware that the moment has arrived, and so they would meet us. So it's not the same concept at all for them. There's just a moment when it's correct.
Okay. I'm just thinking, like, when you say you pass out, now you know the book's got to continue.
Yeah.
Aren't you a bit daunted, thinking I must continue, but I'm going to pass out again? And I don't quite fancy that.
No, for me, I found it quite a natural thing. So I would start writing, and it would happen different ways. Sometimes I would just write down what I was beginning to hear. Sometimes it would be visual, so I would see words on a chalkboard in my mind, and I'd just copy the words. And so I'd be aware of those few words or half a paragraph, and then I wouldn't be aware of anything else.
Okay. But do you know who exactly is channeling or talking through you?
That's the interesting thing. Someone who read the book very early on, before it was published, and they were quite sensitive, and they said to me, do you know there are 7 different people that have been writing this? To them it was very clear when one took over. I must admit, I still find it hard to see where that happens, but there are inklings for me, but something I hadn't noticed.
But people can't they? Because I've been reading books about old Shakespeare, and people say, that's Shakespeare and that's someone else writing that, because of the different styles of writing.
Absolutely, yeah. And some of it's quite philosophical and other parts are not.
Yeah.
And so there's that change there.
Okay. Do you think there's any other books waiting to come forth?
Well, that book again is available on as an e-book through my site as well as Amazon. I've published another ebook called Book of Thoughts.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, and it's basically poems, thoughts, and observations from spirit.
And was that channeled as well?
Those works were completely channeled as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, one of the poems that was channeled in Summerland, called Summerland, is actually in the poems, book of poems as well.
Must be quite something. You come out of your, when you pass out, as you call it, to come around and say, "Oh, that's quite good."
Well, yeah. I mean, again, I was reading it for the first time, and I found it quite interesting. Yeah. And to be honest, I didn't know how long it was going to continue. It could have been 10 years of work, but there was a moment when it ended, and I could see that it had ended, and I thought, right, that's that. And it was actually channeled in 1987.
Sounds a long time ago now,
doesn't
it?
A long time, 30 years. Yeah.
Is it that long? It's longer than I thought.
Yeah, it's a long time. Yeah. And again, I tried to get it published, and publishers tend to want to pigeonhole things. You know, they want it to fit for their market. But I realised I would need patience, and when the moment was right, it would get published. And yeah,
good. Now, we introduced you as an inspirational medium.
Yep.
Let's talk about your mediumship.
Yep.
Right, because I'm a medium, and we've got friends in common, and we know what mediums do. But we all work in a different way, I think. Yeah. How do you work?
Some mediums work mostly clairvoyantly, or it's a mix of clairvoyance and clairaudience, which is, as you know, clairvoyance is clear seeing and clairaudience is clear hearing. I work with all the senses, so I would sometimes get smells, tastes, feelings. For me, I think it's easy, it's something I've got used to. I think for other mediums it would be quite confusing, in the fact that through any particular reading, sometimes I would hear, sometimes I would see, sometimes I would feel, taste. There's a whole mix there. It actually keeps me on my toes, which I'm very grateful for, because I don't know how the next bit of information's coming. It's kind of shot blasting in a sense. Yeah. But because partly of my background, because I work a lot on the lines, I also, when I do demonstrations, I encourage people to ask questions.
Do you mean the telephone lines?
Telephone lines, yeah. My own psychic line, as well as the one that I work for, Psychics Connect. So, but my feeling is that Spirit have taken a lot of effort to get there. And as you know yourself, with mediumship, we find someone in the audience at a demonstration and we give them the message, and we talk to them, and we do expect a yes or a no or a maybe, something like that. But for me, it's very much a two-way conversation. And quite often we'll touch on something and the recipient will have a question, you know, well, I'd like to know a little bit more about that. So I really encourage that.
Good. Okay. I know some mediums don't like any contact with the audience. They just like to give, don't they? But
Yeah, it may be a little belittling, but I feel they talk at a person rather than a conversation.
I
with.
like that because it's audience participation.
Absolutely.
And it's a two-way thing, and the audience can join in as well by listening and, you know.
Absolutely. And you find, for people that may not have seen me work, once I've worked with the first person at a demonstration, it encourages other people as well to say, well, what about this? Can I ask a question about that? And it's you know what it's like? Sometimes you get someone in the audience and they don't want to say yes, no, they're very quiet. But when you're having what I would call a more normal conversation, it creates a more energetic link as well.
What happens to Leo when someone doesn't admit they're receiving a message? I'm asking on a personal level here.
Absolutely. Well, to be honest with you, I know if some of the information is connecting, because the way that I work, I get information, confirmation, information, confirmation. So both the recipient and I know I'm still on track, because you can lose the link. It is difficult. I was doing a demonstration probably about a year ago, and the woman that I went to couldn't understand anything, and her friend next to her was nudging her in the ribs, saying, yes, that makes sense. People deny messages for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes they just don't want to acknowledge within themselves. Sometimes they are literally embarrassed that we've got to them. If I know that I've got a connection, then what I generally would say is, I'll tell you what I've got and we can sort it out, and I just give them what's there. If we can't sort it out, I will tend to leave that with them. And quite often, as I'm sure has happened with you, you know, they come up afterwards and go, I know who that was, you know. In that sense, people are a little strange sometimes, you know.
I'm glad you said that. But I've been doing a bit of research about you, and you was a couple of instances at about 2 years old and 5 years old when you began seeing things.
Yeah, my very first. I hate the word ghost. You know, it's very odd to me. But I saw my first ghost at the age of 2, and I was walking along. We used to live not too far from Manor Park in East London, and we was walking past Manor Park Cemetery, and this would have been around 6:30 or so at night. And as we walked past the cemetery gates, the cemetery must have been more extended at one time, because I knew something was happening. So I turned around and I saw a gentleman rise horizontally through the pavement and kind of just stand up vertically. And my attention was really caught. It didn't seem paranormal or strange in that way. It was just that he was dressed as a Victorian gentleman, so that's what took my attention. I found it quite natural. And my mum and dad were with me. I was in between them. And my dad said, what are you looking at? So I said, oh, there's a funny man behind us. So we all turned round. None of us could see anything. I've peeked back again, saw him again, and this happened 3 or 4 times. So that was my very first experience, if you like. But again, it just seemed natural. It's just the clothes were strange to me.
And I suppose as you grew up, you thought everyone else sees things just like you do.
Absolutely. I just took it as very normal. There are certain things, you know, especially as you're growing up, you don't discuss. I mean, we don't talk about how we breathe and, you know, so I just took it that everyone else could see what I could see. And it was when I was around 10 that it was brought to me, my attention was drawn to it, that perhaps it might not be normal. But I think, again, it was spirit inspired.
Okay. How did you begin working? I mean, did you work through the spiritualist churches, or how did you get to that?
Well, there's 2 instances. I asked Spirit, because they were not pushing, and I said, look, you know, if you need me to train, I want to know 100%. And Robert Brown's quite a well-known international medium, and he came to me in a dream, and he said that Jerry at the Spiritual Association of Great Britain was auditioning for people in her circle. So I'd never heard of Robert Brown. never heard of Jerry, went there. She was taking people into a new circle.
Can you just explain what a circle is for those who don't know?
A development circle is a place where we learn to develop our gifts on a psychic, but for me, more on a mediumship level.
Right.
So it's exploring those gifts and the practice of them. And I mentioned to Jerry that someone called Robert Brown had come to me in a dream and said I should be in her circle. She seemed to be quite impressed with that. And I couldn't actually make that circle, but I joined some time later. And a very, very inspirational teacher, Jerry March.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right. So do you still work in churches, spiritualist churches, or in front of audiences?
Yeah, I still do demonstrations. I teach at my local church as well in South Woodford. And I've been running that now. I've lost count, I think it's 6 years or more.
Have you?
Yeah. And teaching something I really like. To see people come in, sometimes they're quite sceptical, I'm not sure, but I just want to. And I'm really blessed with people that come for the first time actually see and feel and experience things. So I'm very blessed with that.
Where is it you just come back from New Zealand, isn't it?
I just come back from Bali.
Bali?
Yeah.
Sounds like New Zealand.
It's not too far away, actually. I was very privileged to be offered. A company I work for, PsychicsConnect.com, the guy that runs it, he offered me a chance to set up and run a spiritual centre in Bali.
Really?
Yeah, so I went along to see what Bali was like, see how things could generate a business and sustain it. And Bali's a beautiful place. There were certain restrictions there in that it was difficult to buy a house because you can't buy land. They rent it. But also, even some of the mundane things, I have pills which I need to take, and even aspirin, soluble aspirin was a bit of a problem. But the thing that really kind of put me off was it's 1 megabyte hi-fi.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, and at home I've got 100 meg, but the electricity cuts out. It goes down, and to run an internet business really from there, you can get 30 megabytes, but there's
That's a bit static.
we had a bit of static, but they wanted something like £180 a month just to run for 30 megabytes.
Okay.
That's without all the you need aerials and towers and things.
But
with it.
You did work in New Zealand, didn't you?
I worked in New Zealand the year before, and that was a short tour around the capital and working in a theatre and doing some private readings. Yeah, and that was very enjoyable, good experience.
Are you going to go back there sometime?
I actually went back this year. I went back to New Zealand and Australia to look at Australia, wonderful country. So I did those, and then I spent almost 2 months away, 11 days in New Zealand, and I realised that because the weather is so close to ours, I've got something called fibromyalgia, which is chronic pain, chronic fatigue, and the weather really caused me problems, as it does here sometimes. It gets into the joints. So I've ruled New Zealand out, but Australia was wonderful. Heat, yeah.
Maybe I'll pop over to New Zealand and see what I can do over there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what's this rumour I hear about Channel 5? Because I know nothing really. But
Okay.
Tell me what.
I love to manifest, and I manifest all kinds of things. And I said to the universe, I need a manager, I need a script writer, and the manager turned up, and through his connections, we're talking to Channel 5 with the possibility of running a new kind of series. So it's nothing I can talk too much about, but it's exciting stuff. Okay. But in TV, things take a long time sometimes.
Come on. I've seen presenters like me saying, come on, give us a bit more. So, So it's different to anything we've seen on telly before.
It's a different approach, yeah.
Is it ghost hunting?
No, it's not. It's to do with mediumship and giving messages, but it comes from a different angle. And so we don't want to give too much away in case...
Yes, we do, Leo. I've got to do my job here.
In case some of the better-known mediums think, actually, that's a good angle, so we have to keep it under wraps.
Okay.
But as I say, I manifested a script writer, quite a well-known gentleman called Sam Snape, and he's very keen on the book. We're working on scripts for a film, and he loves the book.
So we talk about the book now and right, okay. But now I know time's nearly over.
Yeah.
So thanks for being my guest. But I've got to get in the radio program. You do.
It's Blog Talk Radio.
Yeah.
And you can just Google me for Blog Talk Radio, and it's on every Tuesday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. GMT.
Okay.
Blog Talk Radio's American based, so the program actually goes out all over the world.
And and you have guests on their music, do you?
Yeah, we have guests. We have some music. Basically, what it is live readings.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So it's and it's something I'm very comfortable with. A couple of hours of live readings.
Yeah. What sort of guests do you have on?
I had Robert Brown, an international medium.
So that's the same chap you dreamt about?
Yeah, and I've actually met Robert Brown when I first trained, because Jerry March wasn't available. Yeah. I sat with him for a few weeks, and then we kind of swapped over. But a marvellous medium. Yeah. I saw him doing a demonstration at the Spiritual Association of Great Britain, and he come to a guy that I realised was sceptic. Yeah. And we can't do this now because of all kinds of reasons. But he said to the guy, you're sceptic, so yes, arms folded, all the body language. And he said, so you'd need some convincing evidence. And the guy said, yeah. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you your bank account number.
No, did he?
And he did. And the guy went white. It was wonderful to see. Something I've never forgotten. Yeah. So he was a guest, a wonderful guest. He tours all the time. He's never really in one country for long.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Any exciting guests coming up?
Well, hopefully yourself.
Oh, well, there you go then, Leo. That's what I wanted to hear. Right. And, okay. Well, it seems to be... It's going to be a fantastic year next year, I reckon.
It is. I've been invited by a gentleman called Jock Brokers, who's setting up an organisation called ASMPI, ASSMPI. Right. And really it's to push up the standards of mediumship. Okay. And he's invited me over to the States.
Good grief.
So I'm going to go there, and we're going to talk about a few things. So that's coming up. We're looking for a film director to look at doing the film.
A lot to look forward to. Then
a lot to look forward to.
And this Channel 5 thing. So.
Yeah, hopefully that's going to come round. They seem to be interested. Yeah. I think I'm not really involved in that part of it, but we're in talks, as they say. Okay. So hopefully, yeah.
So watch this space, shall
Absolutely.
we say. Leo, it's been a pleasure having you on again.
Bless you.
I think you'll have a lot to come to tell us next time you come back. Yeah. And thanks to you for watching. And
bless you.
Thanks, Leo. See you again next time.
Thank you so much. God bless.